Okay. Hello again. This is moving right along. Chapter 31 in Genesis. If you want to go ahead and open your Bible, since it's one chapter, we're going to read pretty much all the entire chapter. We'll read it a little bit at a time. Thank you again for the opportunity Pastor, to give me the chance to speak. I do have the setting on landscape today, so I think that'll be better. And so maybe at least the video skills will be a little bit better today. But Beth and I have just moved into a new place. It's kind of an interim place till we're actually going to build a smaller house that kind of downsizing a little bit. It's a different phase in life. But in the meantime, I'm in one of the empty bedrooms, and if you knew what my phone was sitting on, you'd probably laugh. But anyway, I'm not. We won't go into that. So just bear with me. It's a little untraditional setting here, but we're going to read Genesis. Let's just go ahead and get into Genesis chapter 31, and we pray that the Lord will bless the reading of His Word and this challenge time. Let's start out with reading the first couple verses. We're going to just read a few verses at a time, and then we'll just kind of explain them. I think this chapter, for the most part, this chapter is pretty straightforward, really. I mean, you can read it, and you probably can understand the meaning of all the verses, really, without a whole lot of digging too deep. It's pretty straightforward, but there's some really interesting lessons that the Lord's trying to teach. I think even us today, and a couple of them really kind of sprung out to me. And one of them's right here in the very first part here, chapter 31, verses 1 and 2. This is Jacob. Now remember, Jacob is working for his father-in-law Laban, and he's now, we saw in the last chapter, he's married. He's also been father now, and he's been in the land for 20 years. Been in this foreign land for 20 years, and so the Lord's getting ready to call him home. The lesson today is called "On the Road Again." Okay, so he's getting ready to hit the road again, but this time he's going to go back to Canaan, and we're going to see a change in Jacob. Up until now, Jacob's been somewhat of a follower, maybe a little, even in certain ways, kind of weak spiritually, a little bit not so much relying on the Lord as much. But we're going to see a change in Jacob in this chapter. And so as we read first verse 1 and 2, now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob has taken away all that our fathers from what we belonged to our father. He has made all this wealth. Jacob saw the attitude of Laban, and behold, it was not friendly towards him as formerly. So as we stop here and we just consider the first couple verses, what's happening here is Laban's sons are looking at Jacob, and they're seeing Jacob prosper, and we know why, and Jacob knows why, and we're going to see that later. But they see him prospering, and they start getting concerned about their inheritance. And so what's going to be left for them? And so at some point in time, we see Laban's attitude has changed to Jacob. Remember last chapter, I believe it was, where they had the pact that Laban, Jacob wanted to leave after 14 years, after he had married Rachel, wanted to leave and go back to Canaan then, and Laban and him came up with an agreement, and he stayed for another 6 years. And so we see at some point in time, Laban's attitude, I'm not sure if it was his sons that influenced him, but Laban's attitude towards Jacob had changed from a friendly relationship to maybe a little more controversial, a little territorial maybe even. And so we see that Jacob here notices this. And so we read now verse 3. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So again, the Lord now is telling Jacob to leave, and this is new. We know back in chapter 28, verse 15, that the Lord promised that Jacob would return to the land of Canaan at some point. But we see in the last chapter, in verse 25, that after marrying Rachel, it was not quite time. The Lord didn't at that point in time tell Jacob to leave. But at this point in time, the Lord is now urging Jacob to leave. And we see a principle here that I think we need to stop and consider, and that is that God sometimes uses circumstances or other people's attitudes to indicate that a change is needed. A lot of times we have circumstances around us, and to be honest with you, this pandemic has really affected me, affected our business, and so we stop to consider, Lord, what are you doing? What are these circumstances trying to teach us? And we do need to consider, what all is going on around us, and the Lord uses those things. And we see here in Jacob's life that at some point in time, Laban's changed his attitude, and he's going to use that now. Jacob uses that to seize on that, to get an opportunity now to leave this land and go back to his homeland. Verse 4. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field, and said to them, I will see your father's attitude. I see your father's attitude, that is not friendly towards me as formerly, but the God of my father has been with me. You know I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. However, God did not allow him to hurt me. If he spoke thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flock brought forth speckled. And if he spoke thus, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock brought forth striped. Thus God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. So here's Jacob, and he takes Rachel and Leah aside out into the field to get them away. So really to maybe talk to them secretly. And this is the first time that Rachel is actually mentioned first. Leah was his first wife, and Rachel is the next. But in this particular verse, Rachel is listed first, which is significant because now Rachel was becoming, I think, the head of this the wives there that Jacob has, and so that's noted, and so we're going to see Rachel and we're going to see Leah's response to what Jacob had said, but what is interesting here is that he's called them apart. He's trying to tell them what the Lord has done, and so we see that again. And now, if we move to verse 10, and it came about at the time when the flock were mating, that I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats which were mating were striped, speckled, and molded. Then the angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob, and I said, Here am I. He said, lift up your eyes and see that all the male goats which were mating are striped, speckled, and molding. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. So here God comes in a dream. We don't know if this dream was actually the night before, or it could have been, as it seems to indicate, this was some time ago. But at some point in time, that God came in a dream to Jacob, and we've seen that before. But he came to Jacob, and he said, "Look, he's seen everything that Laban's been doing, and it's time to pick up and leave. But he uses the word there, God of Bethel. If we remember back what happened in Bethel, this was the point where Jacob saw the ladder reaching to heaven, and we see that Jacob at that time knew that God had told him that he would give him his blessing, that he would bless his descendants. And so Jacob, again, relies now, and he's starting to take a little bit more of an active role. He knows now this is the time that the God of Bethel, remember what he did there. He took the pillars, the stones, and made a pillar out of them. And so he had in Bethel, he had this symbol that of God and the worship of God. And so he was remembering back to that, and it was because of this dream that he had just had. And so verse 14, Leah and Rachel said to him, "Do we still have any portion or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not reckoned by him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has also entirely consumed our purchase price. Surely all the wealth which God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children. Now then, do whatever God has said to you." So here we go. Rachel and Leah both agree that somehow their father Laban had taken maybe their dowry, and he had misused it, maybe spent it, and this was something that was supposed to maybe go back to them for an inheritance. And so they also had noticed that Laban had seemed to have changed his ways maybe, and so they were in agreement with Jacob. And we see in verse 17, then Jacob arose and put his children and his wives upon camels, and he drove away all his livestock and all his property which he had gathered. He acquired livestock which he had gathered in Padan Aram to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. When Laban had gone to shear his flock, then Rachel stole the household items which were her father's. And Jacob delivered Laban to the Arabian had deceived Laban the Arabian by not telling him that he was fleeing. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose and crossed the Euphrates River and set his face towards the hill country of Gilead. And so Jacob had convinced Rachel and Leah. They were all in agreement. But then all of a sudden, we see that Rachel did something that seemed to be just falls in line with this family, and that is she stole some of these, and they called household idols, from her father Laban's house, and was going to take it with her. We don't know exactly what this purpose of stealing these household idols were. A couple probabilities, based on what we read today, was number one, these idols were kind of a superstitious for protection and blessing. And so it could have been that maybe it mentioned that as far as bearing children, being able to bear children, this would be something that could be used as a token. And or it could be just flat out an idol that could be worshipped. And we don't know exactly. We don't know Rachel's heart necessarily, but we do probably understand that Rachel was clinging on or holding on to some of her past, and that's this family that had these. It was a polytheistic. They really brought in many gods. We're going to see a little bit later how this kind of came into play with Laban and Jacob. But it was just kind of a superstitious type of worship. And so she stole these things. We're not exactly sure why. Jacob didn't know about it. Matter of fact, it's pretty obvious later, because he made a vow back to Laban that if he would have known that Rachel had these, probably wouldn't have made. But this word deceive there, where Rachel stole the idea of he stole the heart, stealing of the heart, and so this was a true deception, and Rachel was just jumped in there, just like Jacob and Laban, and we go to past with Isaac and Rebekah, and there with Jacob, and so it's just it kind of seems to fall right in line that Rachel would do this, but we're not exactly sure why, but that's what happened. So this distance between where Jacob was and he was going to go to Gilead was around 10 days of travel. Okay, and remember, Jacob's taken his wives, his all his cattle, and we know that he was fairly wealthy at this point in time. So it was going to take quite a journey, and it did. It was around 300 miles or so from there to here to there. 10-day journey, probably 30 miles, maybe 25 miles a day, and we see that Jacob had left now and fled. It says here that he fled Laban, the Aramean. Now, this is the first time that he was referred to it this way. So you can see the ties cutting. It was no longer the father-in-law or his father-in-law. It was now just this vague title that was given to Jacob, or to Laban. And we can see here another principle, and that is this: God often uses difficult circumstances to mold leaders. And we're seeing now that Jacob, we're seeing a transformation in his ways. He's no longer the hired hand. He's no longer the brother that's deceiving. And this, the Lord has spoke to him on several occasions, and now he's seeing that the Lord is moving. He is working, and he's ready to take that leadership role. We're going to see that even more as we go through the end of this chapter. So as we get to verse 22, verse 22 says, when it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, then he took his kinsman with him and pursued him a distance of 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. Remember now, it took Jacob 10 days, but it only took Laban 7. He was not encumbered. He didn't have all the livestock and such, so he was just coming with a group of, really army, but a group of his men, and so they were able to make that trip in 7 days. God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream in the night, and said to him, "Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad." So we see here that Laban had a dream. All right, and this goes in line, and it's in character of several things we've seen. Number one, years ago, matter of fact, last time I taught the lesson, Laban and his father, when Eliezer came to request for Rebekah, we see that this Laban and his father had seen the Lord in a dream, and so we see Sarah's protection in Abimelech, in a few chapters back, and so we see that God is using these dreams against the adversaries of his servants in order to make his will done. And so we see that again here, that God spoke to Laban and said, don't harm Jacob, and so don't, either for what you think is good or bad. And so verse 25, Laban caught up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tents in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen camped in the hill country of Gilead. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done by deceiving me and carrying away my daughters like captives of the sword?" Now what's interesting there is that this phrase, "What have you done?" Well, we've seen that before not too long ago, and that's when Jacob married Leah, and when he realized it, he went to Laban and said, "What have you done?" So here we come. We're coming back full circle. It's back and forth with his father-in-law. This has been going on for 20 years now, and there's this deception back and forth. And even though he loved Rachel, he wanted her to be his wife, he had to deal with this Laban. That was his employer to start with, and so he just had this back and forth. And so again, and we saw a few verses ago, Jacob said that Laban had deceived him 10 times. Probably not exactly 10, but it was just, again, another way of saying, Laban has deceived me over and over. And so here, the tables are turned just a bit. So verse 27, why did you flee secretly and deceive me? And did not tell me so that I might have sent you away with joy and with songs and timbrel and with lyre, and did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob. Now you have indeed gone away, because you have longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Okay, so Laban's, again, the Lord told him not to harm him, but Laban was going to get a few words in, and he was telling Jacob, look, you did foolish, and so this was his last parting shot. But he was not going to harm Jacob, because he did fear God. Remember, we talked about that polytheistic view. Laban seems to understand that Jacob's God did have a lot of power. Matter of fact, the blessing of the crops, he noticed that. He's seen this. So it just was something that Laban seemed to deal with. But we're going to see Jacob is focused on one God, okay? And we're going to see that in these next few verses, that Jacob's focus is not on many gods. And it's really a breakaway. I think Jacob finally come to the, again, you've got a wife here that has got some idols, and so we're not sure exactly how he led his family up until this point, but we're going to see that Jacob now is going to take a stand. So verse 31, then Jacob replied to Laban, because I was afraid, and I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. The one with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what is yours among my belongings, and take it for yourselves. For Jacob did not know Rachel had stolen them. He said, look, if you find it, lay it out in front of me. And if there's one that's taken it, you can put them to death. And yet, again, he had no idea that Rachel had taken these. Verse 33. So Laban went to Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two maids, and did not find them. Then he went out to Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household items and put them into the camel's saddle, and she sat on them. And Laban felt through all the tent, but did not find them. She said to her father, let not my lord be angry. I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is upon me. So he searched, but did not find the household items. So here Rachel hid them. This was time of women, so she didn't want to get up, and so Laban just didn't find them, and then was not able to find them. And so verse 36. Now verse 36, we're going to see now Jacob's response. Up until this point, Laban's kind of been the aggressor. He's going after Jacob. He's saying, look, you left without me being able to kiss my grandkids goodbye. You've done all this, and he was not backing down. But now Jacob, I think for the first time, finally got a little bit of backbone here with his father-in-law, and he's getting ready just to kind of lay into him. He knew now that the Lord was on his side. He knew the Lord had spoken to Laban in this dream, so he was ready to go here. So verse 36. Then Jacob became angry and contended with Laban, and Jacob said to Laban, what is my transgression? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? though you have felt through all my goods that you have found of all your house, what have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flocks. That which is torn of beast I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. You required it of my hand, whether stolen by day or not stolen by night. Thus I was. By day the heat consumed me, and frost by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Here he goes again. You keep changing your mind. You keep deceiving me over and over. If the God of my father, and here we go, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the toil of my hands, so he rendered judgment last night. So Jacob's telling Laban that if God of my father, God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac, and we're going to see that these two, we're going to see this again here in a few more verses, the fear of Isaac, and we'll explain that in just a few more verses. But we're going to see a response again from Laban. Verse 43. Then Laban replied to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, and the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these my daughters or my children whom you have borne? So now come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let the witness between you and me. Now, so Laban said, look, everything you've seen, everything you have, it belonged to me. Again, it's just something that Laban just couldn't put down. He just couldn't see how the Lord's work in Jacob. He knew that the Lord blessed him, but he just was not able to come to grips with it. Verse 45, then Jacob took a stone and set it upon a pillar. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. So they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Now Laban called it, and I'm going to try the best I can on this, Jager Sahadathu. Sahadathu, I think is what it is. But Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this heap is a witness before you and before me this day. Therefore it was named Gilead. And Mizpah, for he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when you are absent one from the other. So again, they made this covenant. They piled these stones. They let each person, in the party come and lay a stone to be a witness to these to this agreement. Why was Laban wanting to do this? I think Laban knew that Jacob could really get strong and could be a threat, maybe a military threat at some point in time. And so Laban was willing. He knew the Lord was with Jacob, so he was not willing to harm Jacob. But he wanted for the future. This was for him. This was all one-sided kind of transaction. But he wanted a barrier, a boundary between now Jacob and him. And so basically these two words, Jager Sahatha and Gilead, were two. They meant the same thing, but they were just two different. One was Hebrew and the other was Aramean. So this was it kind of shows you that these two men, even though they were making this covenant, they were from two different religious backgrounds. They just They weren't going to see eye to eye on that. One was polytheistic. One believed in a lot of spiritualism. And look, honestly, I think he even believed in the true God. It's just he didn't believe he was the only. And so, we see that a lot. I think we see that a lot in today's culture. People that'll go and say, look, I believe in Jesus. It's just that I just believe there's other ways too. And yet our response should be, look, I'm the way, the truth. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Jesus is the only way. And so as we see Jacob, he's finally realizing that he's going to be a little bit more bold here and a little bit more bold in his witness. And so we see now Laban also calling this place Mitzpah. That's translated as like a watchtower. Okay, and so it's just a place where you watch one side or the other and make sure that both places are living up to their side of the bargain. And this even in today in this part of the land where Israel and over into Syria, I know my son had a chance to visit Israel, and he went to this area, and I think Pastor Mike did too when he went to visit Miss Nancy. But it's a place where they're both keeping an eye on. Even to today, they're keeping an eye on each other there. So it's verse 50. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives besides your daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold the pillar which have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and a pillar as a witness, that I am not to pass your heap, or you to harm, and you will not pass by this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, and this is again Laban, God of Abraham, and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. That's really interesting, the fear of Isaac. Okay, it didn't say the God of Isaac, the fear of Isaac. And I think what is probably trying to get across here is this Laban was fearful of this God. And he knew the true God. I think he knew, and he even mentioned him here, the God of Abraham. But Jacob is reiterating that it's the fear of Isaac. It's the fear of the God of Isaac. And so it was the same fear that was brought to Laban is what Jacob is referring to here when he's talking about the fear of Isaac. And so swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And this is a reference, I think, to the fear that Laban had. And so he's witnessing. One last attempt to say, look, there's only one God. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his kinsmen to the meal, and they ate the meal and spent the night in the mountain. Early in the morning Laban arose and kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. And so as chapter 31 closes out, and we move on next week to chapter 32, we see that what a change in Jacob. Jacob is now ready to be the leader of his household. He's ready to be the leader of this new inheritance that God had given him with his flocks. And now back in Canaan, he was where the Lord wanted him to be. So he was in a right mind. I think he was in his leadership role. He was also in the right place. And the Lord was getting ready to use him. And Jacob probably didn't know what all was getting ready to happen, but he knew that the Lord was getting ready to use him. And so we see in this chapter that Jacob invoked God 8 times. And that's something new here with Jacob. And so Jacob now had grown. And when you think about, as we close out the message today, the Lord used these 20 years in Jacob. The Jacob that was here at the end of this journey was far different than the Jacob that started. And even though Laban, who was deceiving and cunning, and we know what happened with the marriage ceremonies, and we know, Jacob saying 10 times he deceived me. That again, it's maybe innumerable times. He couldn't come up with a number, and so Jacob, the Lord used that in Jacob's life, and it molded him. And so at the end of it, when it was all said and done, and he's back in Canaan, the Lord now has blessed Jacob, and Jacob is now ready to serve the Lord. So as we move forward, as we consider what the Lord is doing in our lives, just realize that even though things may not go our way, maybe things are during this whole breakdown of seems like society, we can fret, and look, I do, and I have to admit that. But we have to remember that the Lord uses these things to develop his leader, and that's what the Lord was doing in Jacob's life. So thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.